I was talking about freedom of speech versus freedom of expression the other day, and this is a really important concept that we define things today. And I made some notes. I was thinking about Thomas Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who you've heard me talk about a lot. Not so much Hobbes, and I'm not talking about Calvin and Hobbes. For those of you who don't know Thomas Hobbes, he's a pre-revolutionary thinker who wrote a book, a tome, an epic volume called Leviathan. And I'm not talking about the roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland, okay? Leviathan is one of the most important political texts of all time. And it's important that we remember these guys were writing at a time of absolute kings, right? So freedom of speech ain't free. Your grandparents earned it. You didn't pay for it. You're just receiving the interest off of what they invested. So this is very important because I want to talk about people who stand up for freedom of speech are usually people who are actually not interested in free speech at all. They're just interested in chaos and saying whatever they want that's hateful and using legal or legislation and law to back it up. Okay. So dictators and lousy politicians are taking advantage of what they didn't earn. Okay. That's a big point that I just wrote down. So I wanted to say that because people like Poilievre and these guys, and I said this to his face actually when I met him outside of Chapters in Newmarket a couple of years ago. I said, you know, my grandparents and all these people went to war, and you're going around and lying to people who don't have the same level of education. I asked him 4 times, "Are you educated, sir?" And he finally answered yes. And I said, well, therefore, it's not right that you're going around and using the credulity, or I don't want to say naivete, because not everyone has the privilege of these experiences, right? So it would be like me doing a PhD and knowing what I know and going around and being a snake oil salesman to harm you and your family. And that's really why I'm really angry with Canadian politicians these days, because they're overstepping and they are being the Leviathan. They're being the sovereign king state, and we need to address this. But the problem is, as Hobbes would say, and Rousseau, is that without government, humanity is in a state of nature. And this, people will say, well, this is great. Nature is beautiful. No, look at what's happening in Gaza, because ultimately, for 99.9% of humanity's history, 14,000 years of history, go back, listen to the podcast. People have only been quote unquote free for less than 100 years. And that's, the cultural majority in whatever country they exist. So people in a state of nature, it's chaos, because if I'm bigger than you, I can take what you want. Okay, and it wasn't even until 1929 that the Canadian government recognized women as persons. Okay, so Nellie McClung and Emily Murphy, all of these suffragettes and women who went to jail for girls to go to school today, the fact that this isn't being taught critically, they would probably be very, very upset, because what's actually happening is a patriarchy is not just a system of men. It's a system of authoritarian dictatorship telling you what to believe and what to think. So people who have been oppressed, this is Paulo Freire from yesterday, people who have been oppressed can join systems of oppression like police. So women and people who have been oppressed traditionally in the past can join the patriarchy. It's not just men like myself, for the record. And that's the difference, is because I think a lot of my freedom of speechers are feeling as though they can't express themselves, but the reality is they don't know how to say it. Keep reading, boys, okay? Just because all you know are words like the R slur or F slur, it's not the 1980s. We need to address this and keep moving, okay? Become educated. If you don't have the words to express yourself, you don't have freedom of speech. Therefore, we need to support public education, because if people can't express their feelings and communicate, it leads to violence, a state of nature. And even, you think, well, I would be okay in a state of nature. No, because the Leviathan is already established. Okay, the billionaires, the oligarchy, you're not part of it. We're not part of it. Quit splitting us against them. It's us, all the plebes. Unless you are a billionaire and you are producing, you are a feudal slave. Get over it. And this is it. They're trying to split us against each other, immigrants, new Canadians, as opposed to going against them and doing what's right. So for 1,000 years of European feudalism, that's, medieval times, kings, horses, jousts, and people in the fields, like in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, right? And that's what we are becoming, because we're not looking at the information provided to us, and we're allowing the news networks and multinational news organizations to become the church of the past, to interpret what's happening for us, as opposed to reading the Bible or watching the world ourselves. Watch the world, not your TV. So Hobbes says life without government this is his most famous quote from Leviathan: life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So the idea that people, again, read Shakespeare, all these people lived, decent lives. It's not as short as people think, but, into their 50s, maybe 60s. Some people lived longer, sure, but they didn't have dentists. Go to a developing country. You see, relatively speaking, Canada is so well off. Go to a place where there's no medical care. The first thing you'll notice is people's teeth. And here in Canada, we're so privileged, we actually say that your teeth aren't part of your holistic dental plan and shouldn't be covered by health plans. Conservatives voted for this. There's your freedom of speech. People who don't make enough money to pay for their kids' teeth, again, are now in the state of chaos in nature because somebody else has dictated to them that, they should be able to do this. Well, look at the kids of Gaza. Look at the men of Gaza. A lot of big, tough guys there, too, probably the same size, right? Yep. Freedom of speech. So, here it is. Without a social contract with governments. And again, this was at a time where Thomas Hobbes was talking, we need a power, we need a sovereign power, we need a king. Because if he had spoken of democracy, he would have been ousted, he would have been killed, excommunicated, because he didn't have freedom of speech. So he had to say that people needed a king. No, they don't. But without government, it leads to chaos. It's cold. And he discusses this. We need security from ourselves. Yet in the modern day, we have freedom of speechers who are saying we don't have freedoms. You're just not, you have cultural pushback from people who are saying, no, you can't say the R slur. You can't make fun of trans and gay people. That's your community, peer pressure saying, stop talking like that. And then you have people who are trying to sustain the hate as opposed to adjusting, and they're saying they're being oppressed. No, you are the oppressors, and therein you give power back to oppressors like Donald Trump or Pierre Poilievre, who tell you what you want to hear because they'll just take over the system and they don't give a damn about you. If you don't believe me, ask Charlie Kirk. Rest in peace, because nobody deserves that. And I don't want to leverage people, but it's their own side leveraging it to create chaos, to take us back to a state of nature. How much business is being done? Everyone's talking about uh, the economy. How much business is being done when everybody's in a state of fear, of abstract unknown, what's coming for me? Are our politicians going to be murdered? Do you want to live there? No. So the whole point of this is we have been handing back everything that humanity has worked for the last almost 300 years since the French Revolution, so that we can have open debate, so that you can say, well, I want to call people an R slur or an F slur. And then in an open debate with your peers, you have 30 people on one saying, no, sir, you do not need to talk like that. We don't need to put people down. That's not freedom of speech. That's oppression. And so Canada, okay, and Pierre Elliott Trudeau and all of the people who put the charter into place in the 80s saw this coming 50 years ago. Genius, visionaries, back when politicians actually cared about their people. So if you've come to Canada and you don't look like me, even if you've been here a little bit longer, people don't care. They want you gone. Do you see? And people who have been oppressed have joined the patriarchy cultural majority, thinking that, like an abused dog, you're still a slobbering dog, even if you're working for somebody who has you in chains. Don't be fooled. Join the dogs and fight for freedom. Okay, we are handing it back. So again, South Park, saving the world. Didn't see that coming, but I've been watching it since grade 8. We used to have to stay up on Fridays until midnight at our friend's house to watch it because it was considered so offside. Okay, kids? In the 90s, we weren't allowed to watch The Simpsons. Get a load of that. So Team America, fuck yeah, world police. What did they say? Freedom ain't free. It costs folks like you and me. Okay? None of us, most of us haven't gone to war. Why? Because we wear the poppy. We go to Remembrance Day assemblies. We remember the Holocaust. And the fact that we think it can't come back is, Francis Fukuyama in 1991 talked about the end of history because it was the end of the Cold War and the US won. No, they didn't. And it was that ego, the not letting Russia into NATO in 2002, 2003. George Bush takes us into Iraq, or the US into Iraq. Canada stays out because of Jean Chrétien, who was one of the men who worked with Canada, with Trudeau through the 70s and 80s to establish a system separate from the Americans, the banking system, all of these things that have given us the extra time between chaos, what you see in Gaza and the US. Thank those people who were morally good, liberal Democrats. Okay, it wasn't because of people like Donald Trump or Pierre Poilievre that we still, that we're living the way we do. Okay, people like you and me. What have you done? What have we done for democracy? Well, I've served my country. I've done 13 years teaching. I'm doing a PhD, and now I'm sitting here trying to make videos. Leviathan, again, absolute sovereign power in this case. It's the system. So Leviathan is like a giant. We've come to associate the word Leviathan with giant, right? And it's an absolute sovereign power. So when Hobbes was writing, there were kings, and he was trying to end the system of divine right of kings, where kings were given their position based on their birth position. And that's a lot like billionaires today, because who should be able to inherit $1 billion if they've never earned it? So if Bill Gates' son gets all of his money, I don't know their business, but is it fair that he should, if his father started and built Microsoft? Is it true capitalism? Is it the American dream? No, because if you say Bill Gates' son gets all of his money and power, you've returned to pre-French revolutionary ideals of a state of nature where people like you and me will never be able to advance out of the fields. But we did because we're in a house because of people like Hobbes. So we think, oh, I have a house, I have a TV, I can go on a vacation once every 5 years. Therefore, I am free. Wrong. See, we are in chains. It is David Foster Wallace. We are in the water. We don't realize, relatively to the rest of the world, how good we have it. Quit watching TV. Go outside. It's peaceful. It's beautiful. Last thing, key takeaway for freedom of speechers who just don't get it yet. Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, he talks directly about the dangers of anarchy and chaos. What happens when there is no government? What happens when there is no social order? And this is why we have the rise of the police state, because these dictators are eroding liberal democracies, charters, freedoms of speech. And actually, people who argue for freedom of speech to stand up for hate, what they don't realize is that the train is already gone, and that by the time they're the ones who are under the heat of free speech, or whatever the government or people decide to do with them, send them to war. Okay, ask guys who got shipped off to Vietnam, black soldiers who were sent later. In World War I, Canada wouldn't send Indigenous soldiers or men of color because the white guys said, nah, we don't trust them. Why? Because the white guy knows for however long they've been subjugating these people, and who wants to give the people they've subjugated guns? It's simple. Don't overthink it. People in nature, if we're honest with ourselves, it's competitive, right? We need governments to protect us from anarchy and chaos and to protect us from ourselves. It's a social contract, collective versus individual. My house, public schools, public health. In a state of chaos, none of that works. And that's why it's all falling apart, is because nobody's focused. We're fighting our neighbors instead of standing up to the Leviathan, thinking one guy, Doug Ford or Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney, even, who's doing, nothing and just economy, economy, economy. Why isn't anybody regaining hope? Because you don't see yourself in it. This is Canada 2.0. We need a reformation, not revolution. And you see people calling for revolution, very dangerous, because you don't understand what revolution entails. Go ask the Jacobins and the Girondins of the French Revolution. They called it the Terror. For years, it took, a 15-year vacuum approximately until Napoleon, was able to establish again the Leviathan to reestablish order in France. It wasn't just 1789 and they went and took the Bastille, and then we all have the Declaration of Human Rights, the rights of man. No, it took there was years of another 100 years of totalitarianism after that. And so all of this has come from guys like Thomas Hobbes and Rousseau, so that we don't have to live through it again. We need government to protect us from ourselves, collective versus individual rights. So what do I sacrifice at birth? Well, I didn't have a choice because I'm born here. But the idea is I can't go around and just F slur and R slur people and say whatever I want to people and hurt them and denigrate them, because that that would eliminate the collective contract. Because in order to benefit from people who, I don't agree with, does that mean that I don't like the work that benefits my nation and my country? So people who go after trans people, gay people, stop it. Stop it. All you're doing is projecting a really old school, disgusting, rights for me, but not for them. Rights here, but not over there. That's fascism, people. Wake up. Read a book. Did you not watch Schindler's List? Did you not watch Saving Private Ryan? You see, every movie I went to in the 90s was about World War II and the Nazis. Go watch it all. Don't become one. It's disgusting. Really, it's not cool. It's not cool. And so people must be kept in awe. And this is what Hobbes said, and a lot of people now will say, well, you can't quote Hobbes because he liked totalitarians. No, he didn't. He did that to stay alive and not be excommunicated, to have a book come out and actually start debates. He had to play within the systems that he did. Because again, if we get to the part where all your freedom of speeches are like, oh yeah, Donald Trump, he's burning books. You're not going to be able to question him. State of nature, and people must be kept in awe or afraid, including the government. You ever heard of torches and pitchforks? Humans are fundamentally self-interested, competitive, and this leads to a war against all internally. So if you want to go outside and shoot your guns off into the sky and scare people, what do you think that's going to cause a ripple effect? Watch BBC Earth. David Attenborough. Oh, watch as the tiger eats all of the babies of the jaguars. We are the jaguars. Okay, and I know tigers and jaguars don't live together, but you see, it's absurd. Stop being absurd. So even if you're a free speecher, this state of chaos, if I'm bigger than you, I got more weapons and resources, I can take you down. It leads to feudalism and the Walking Dead, little compounds here and there where guys with eye patches and one leg come around and shoot each other. Watch TV. It's not better than what you're doing. Go out and get a job. Free speechers only espouse hate speech. That's what I'm getting to anyway. The Leviathan knows this. Donald Trump's dictators, Putin, Erdogan, okay, all of these people know this. All of the people who have, as South Park has recently said, people have destroyed democracy in America because they don't care about it. All they care about is getting their nut and getting money. And that's why I'm doing this. It's not about likes. It's not about my reputation, because ultimately my reputation is meaningless in a war. If I get drafted, if I get sent away, if I lose everything that, my grandfather and all of his generation went to fight, I am nothing. You are nothing. Your house, your family, it all goes away in a state of chaos. Your story, it's ego. Watch a war movie and watch how every grown-ass man, when shot, okay, Giovanni Ribisi, the medic in Saving Private Ryan, he gets shot in the chest, and Steven Spielberg makes it like one of the most horrific 5-minute scenes in Hollywood where he's crying for his mother. Giovanni Ribisi, I want my mom, because that's it. All these freedom of speechers, these January 6ers, all these convoy guys who went and had a hot tub party, who lined their kids up in front of the Ambassador Bridge, who cost Canada $4.6 billion. Don't talk to me about economy. Because what you're doing by standing up for what you think is free speech, your hate and your garbage, you're costing me. You're costing everything that my grandparents made, and you're blaming it on new Canadians and immigrants. Shame on you. Stop it. It's disgusting. Learn something. We all went to the same public schools. And if you're one of these people who was in high school or whatever, says, oh, school's stupid, I don't need this. Where are you now? Do you see all of the people who say, oh, I could drop out of high school and become Bill Gates? He's the one in a billion. Where are all the other guys who dropped out and did nothing? Make videos and tell the young men, don't treat them as boys. Because, Hitler and all of these people marched when the Russians got into Berlin and nobody else was willing to fight for Hitler. He sent out all the 8-year-old boys. He sent out babies to die. And so don't talk to me about being tough. You don't know tough. You don't know what kids can handle. They did recycling programs. They had war gardens. Kids in World War II, go back and watch shows from the 1990s, Home Improvement, My Girl. Macaulay Culkin gets stung by bees and dies. Oh, you can't say that out loud. We can't even say bees because bees are triggering. Garbage. You trigger me. Everybody else's trigger. Where's everybody else's freedoms? You see, freedom of speechers aren't freedomers. They're freedomers, because all they want is to control you and me. Stand up to them. Draw a line in the sand, and that's it. As if you don't draw a line, they just keep taking it. You give them an inch, you take a mile. Stop. Not going back to pre-revolutionary times. We've come too far. We got cell phones, and quit calling them phones. They're supercomputers. Google it. Few other guys who are out there actually standing up, comedians who are now sort of hidden because they don't know what to do. You've painted yourself into a corner. You rooted for the guy who for a decade and for 2 decades, you've got Rosie O'Donnell, all these people who were bang on about this guy. And now all these comedians, the right-winger tough guys who just got popular off what South Park is saying, making your nut, going out and making fun of trans people, making fun of disabled people, saying open up the gun legislation. Oh, who cares about Trump? Who cares about Epstein? Where are you now? You see, all the freedom of speechers, don't be one of them. Don't buy into their shtick, because they won't be there for you when the going gets tough. How do I know? Go ask all of the people in Gaza, in Palestine, all the young IDFers, all the Canadians and the American Zionists who are signing up to go to Israel and fight, knowing damn well what's happening. That is absolutely disgusting. And those people need to be held responsible. The unwavering arc of history, the good will prevail. One candle lights an entire dark room. Don't fool yourself. We're here, but we need to unite, because fascism and hate throughout history, every single time, it's not because of, everybody's hateful. It's because of the people on the other side, the people who are so pro-war, so pro-hate, so anti-everybody else. They'll go and they'll just be willing to die in the streets. The Nazis lined up, they beat up the communists, they beat up the moderates until they wouldn't come out in the streets anymore. You have to have the same resolve, but you cannot find a middle ground with fascists, because people who are at this point are lacking education. People who espouse free speech, they're where are they? They'll say it all, and then all of a sudden they've got their money, they've got their protections, and they head for the hills. And that's what's happening with these modern governments and our current politicians. We need to hold them accountable. We need to save public education. We need to save public health, because ultimately, with these types of people, they're not interested in us, they're interested in our money. And once the money and resources are gone, so too will they. In their jets, they'll go to their islands with, whatever goes on in these islands. It's probably not much different. You see, we love to, oh, look at this little book over here on this island. Do you know how many other islands there are right now? Look for the islands. Quit living in the past. Where are the alphas now? The guys who are out there ruining our democracy, who are not tough enough to actually ever want to go do anything and fight for freedoms. Where are you?